Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Congressman Joe Pitts of the 16th Congressional District. Welcome to you all. Thank you for attending this press conference on this important matter. I'd like to start by bringing your attention to the letter that you have that was circulated, that was sent last week to Secretary Clinton, renewing our request to deny Narendra Modi, Chief Minister of Gujarat, a visa to enter the United States. That is the purpose of this press conference, and I would also like to introduce our MC for this press conference, Jennifer Pressholt. Ms. Pressholt is the Deputy Director of the Advocates for Human Rights and the Director of International Justice. Ms. Pressholt has a BA in Political Science from Yale and MALD from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where she studied international human rights law and international refugee policy. Ms. Pressholt has worked on refugee and asylum issues for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Geneva, Switzerland. She's also interned for the Reebok Human Rights Program in the United Nations Subcommission on Prevention of Discrimination Against and Protection of Minorities. So I'll turn the podium over to Jennifer at this time.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I am Jennifer Pressholt from the Advocates for Human Rights, and we are all here today to draw attention to the request that Congressman Pitts alluded to. This request was sent to Secretary of State Clinton, and the request is that the U.S. government deny entry into the United States of Mr. Narendra Modi, who's Chief Minister of the Indian state of Gujarat. We're so honored to have with us today several of the 25 members of Congress who made this recent request, which was truly a bipartisan statement on the importance of accountability for violations of religious freedom and human rights. Mr. Modi's visa was denied in 2005 under the International Religious Freedom Act on the grounds of his complicity as Chief Minister in 2002 in extensive violations of human rights and religious freedoms during the horrific violence in Gujarat in 2002. That visa ban, we all strongly believe, should be maintained. So we'll be hearing from several speakers today. We have 3 members of Congress with us now, and so we'll begin with them as their schedules are tight. We also have several other speakers, including representatives from several non-governmental organizations who've been working, like the Advocates for Human Rights, on religious protections in the country of India and the state of Gujarat, as well as members of the family of some of the victims of the violence in Gujarat. So we'll begin now with Congressman Joe Pitts from Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all for coming, and a special welcome to the members of the former parliamentarian Jaffrey who perished in the riots in 2002. I'd like to thank my colleagues Frank Wolf and Trent Franks for working together with me on this issue, and I'd like to thank our 23 colleagues who also supported the victims of the Gujarat riots by joining in the letter to Secretary Clinton. And I stand here today with these victims of this horrific abuse and violence, one that drew an international outcry and condemnation in 2002. In that year, in Gujarat, more than 2,000 Muslims and other non-Hindus lost their lives, and hundreds of places of worship were burned or damaged. And the Chief Minister, Modi, has been condemned for his government's material support and leadership in the activities surrounding the attacks. I'll never forget when I and some of my colleagues visited there shortly after the violence. We visited the home of the Jaffreys, where 75 women and children had fled, thinking they could find refuge in his home, in the parliamentarian's home. And they were burned. They were literally massacred, butchered, and burned to death in that home. And we saw the remains. We saw the remains of blood on the wall. We saw the remains of the carnage, the burning timbers. I'll never forget even seeing a little teacup sitting, so fragile, in the kitchen that survived. But as we met with victims of the massacre, And the officials in Gujarat province, we asked them, why didn't the police respond to what was occurring? And the police said, we had no orders to respond. The NGOs who've looked at this issue report that the state's political supporters continue to threaten activists who are seeking justice for these victims after all these years. Chief Minister Modi and his government's response to the riots, their obstruction of justice following the attacks, is a severe violation of human rights that the United States has long condemned. The International Religious Freedom Act requires that we oppose human rights abuses like those seen in Gujarat, incidents where foreign governments not only tolerate but engage in violation of religious freedom. And now it seems as though Mr. Modi is waging a public relations campaign to abdicate his administration's responsibility for these attacks. He's visiting other countries in an attempt to clear his name and in anticipation of seeking higher office in India. In the past, the previous administration, the Bush administration, rightly denied Mr. Modi's request for a visa to enter the United States because of his complicity with these attacks. And we're here today to call on the present administration, President Obama, Secretary Clinton, to stand with the victims and continue this good policy. I'll never forget the sight, it's still etched in my mind, of this horrific violence. We did visit later, and where they had rebuilt some of the small homes, we gave keys to the widows, gave sewing machines out to the families, and they were so moved by a small measure of compassion from those on the outside wishing them justice. I'm impressed by their courage as they seek justice despite obstruction of individuals in Gujarat. The U.S. State Department has maintained that the Gujarat government, still under the leadership of Mr. Modi, has not adequately pursued justice for the victims of violence, and until justice is served, we ask the Obama administration not to allow Mr. Modi to spread falsehood, to come here to the United States and raise funds to seek to be elevated to be Prime Minister of India. With that, I'll yield back.